The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, Week 14 injury update, rankings adjustment, DraftKings ownership, and the rest. We'll talk about some spreads. We'll talk about whatever. We're just getting ready for Sunday this week. If you want to get into a draw for 20 DK dollars, easy. Smash the like button for the episode. Leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section. Tell me, if Josh Jacobs sits this week and he is out, where would you rank DeAndre Washington and Jalen Rocket Richard in the Week 14 running back PPR rankings? That's the giveaway for 20 DK dollars. The giveaway for 60 DK bucks is subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. Download them episodes that are up there already. Even if you want to listen to them or not, just download them, erase them. Leave a 5-star review, DraftKings handle, something you like about this show. You'll be in a draw for 60 DK dollars. The Pat Mayo Experience will be live Sunday morning, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time, DraftKings YouTube channel, and up on the podcast feed after the fact. But if you have viewer questions for your lineups this week, you'll want to tune into me and Garion and Cuss. You probably don't want to tune in for Cuss advice, but hey, he's going to be on the show, and he will give you an answer. So maybe you can just do the opposite of what he says, and you'll be fine. Who knows? Additionally, I have been nominated. Well, this show has been nominated for 6 industry awards, including Show of the Year, Betting Show of the Year, but I have been nominated for Fantasy Sports Analyst of the Year. Am I going to win? Probably not. However, with your help, I could win. So if you just hit the description of this podcast or a video, there is a link there where you can vote on this stuff. Vote Pat Mayo for Fantasy Analyst of the Year, if I actually get enough of this stuff. I know my audience, well, not as large as, let's say, ESPN or the Fantasy Footballers, that kind of thing. Very engaged audience, so I really do appreciate that out there. Spend the 20 seconds, please vote for Pat Mayo, and hit up, like, I don't know, Jake for social media or something like that. Throw some bones Jake's way. He always lends me his time. But anyway, if you guys could vote in that, it would be highly appreciated. And I'm going to be using fansharesports.com to find the ownerships this week, at least projected ownerships. If you use the promo code PME, you get yourself a discount at fansharesports.com. Enough of that. Let's get into it. Mike Leone from dailyroto.com is joining me on the line at 2 hats, 1 Mike on the Twitter machines. And Mike, did you know if you use promo code the PME at Daily Roto, you get yourself 20% off?
That's quite the discount. I thought it was 10% off, so 20% off.
Maybe it is 10%
Get over
off.
there.
I have no idea.
It's something off, and you should definitely check it out. It's a really good way to check out our product. But I want to hear, what's your slogan for getting people to vote for you? You know, we've got the Andrew Yang Humanity First. You should go with Fantasy First. Is that can I pitch that to you?
If it was Fantasy First, like, here's the thing. If I'm nominated for Best Fantasy Sports Analyst of the Year, I'm probably the shittiest out of all of the people as it pertains to actually making picks. So that's really working against me. Entertainment first. Laughs first.
Okay. All right. We're working on it. We'll get it molded, sculpted by the end of the show. We'll get people out to vote for you.
Well, maybe
I'll vote for you, Pat.
Maybe I should. Well, yeah, you didn't nominate yourself or Davis, so there you go. So you could just vote for me instead.
We're on top of things.
I can see
That's
that
for sure.
I'll just lift it from Russell Crowe and Gladiator and be like, vote Pat Mayo. Are you not entertained? There you go. That's not bad for something on the spot.
Yeah, let's get a GIF of you doing that. And we'll get it spread around.
I'm not the most gifable type person. I'm not Andrew Cuss and I'm not Feinberg. Those two, that's what GIFs are made for.
Yeah, I saw a good one with Jeff the other day. There's just so many good disappointment gifts with Jeff, I feel like, usually related to the Chargers or just like him thinking hard. And this is what I think of when I think of Jeff, is like him rolling the hands through the hair. Oh, man. That's my Jeff.
That's not bad. You need better. You and I do not have the flow to match Jeff.
It's hard to impersonate correctly.
Yeah. So let's get into this. Running backs for the week, the full injury report as it stands right now on a Friday afternoon. In my rankings, you can find in the description of this podcast or video. They are currently updated. I'll update them again on Saturday and then again on Sunday once we get official words on everything. But Delvin Cook, he's going to play. Matt Breida, he's going to play. Marilyn Mack, he's going to play. Not sure about Zach Zenner and what his role for the Dolphins is going to be, but he's likely to be active. Likely out, Jordan Howard. Officially out, Kalen Ballage, Darrell Williams, Damian Williams, and James Conner. The big one right now is Josh Jacobs. He has the shoulder injury. He has not practiced all week. That doesn't mean he's not going to play, but he's probably like 50-50 at best. And here's the issue. They don't play until the later set of games against Tennessee. So we may not know whether or not Josh Jacobs is going to be active at home against Tennessee or not. It's not a great matchup. Tennessee has a pretty fantastic run defense, but Josh Jacobs is definitely someone you're going to play. So the move right now is just go out and pick up DeAndre Washington and get him on your team. Whether you have Josh Jacobs or not, this way you block the Josh Jacobs owner from having a very easy out. And I mean, DeAndre Washington's not going to be as good as Josh Jacobs, but it'd be someone that you could pick up and play in his place if he was not playing. And then you throw your opponent completely into a scramble. These are the type of moves that you need to do right now in the fantasy playoffs. But on DraftKings, I think it's even more tricky because Leone, he's $3,000 on DraftKings this week. If Jacobs doesn't play, like, are you just going to late swap onto DeAndre Washington? Because we know that people don't late swap, so people just aren't going to use him.
Yeah, my first instinct was between him and Richard, it might be
Richard. Rocket Richard.
Rocket Richard. It might be a little bit dicey in terms of how things are split up, and you might not get good value out of either. But as I'm fooling around with our projections at Daily Roto, where you can mess around with the projected share of rushing attempts, share of targets and whatnot, those guys are so cheap that it's tough to not get them both as like pretty decent values. If Jacobs is out, with Richard, carrying the load in the passing game, you'd be looking at a low to mid-teens target share for him, probably around a 45 to 50% rush share for DeAndre Washington. And at both those numbers, each of those guys becomes a good but not amazing play. And then if it doesn't end up getting divvied up how we think and it slides one way or the other, whichever way it slides, that person's going to be a really good play. As you mentioned, people don't utilize late swap as much as they should. So if you look in your flex spot there's a couple plays on the Tennessee side that give you the pivots if Jacobs does play. So if you want to play DeAndre Washington, Jonnu Smith's only $3,100 more. I know you don't ideally want to play a tight end with flex, but it's the injury show. Adam Humphries is out, so that should help the targets go around. So not only Jonnu Smith, but you get Corey Davis at $3,900. That's the same price as Rocket Richard. So you've got some maneuverability there. If you want to play these Raiders guys, just make sure if you're playing DeAndre Washington, leave that $100 extra so you can pivot him to Smith. If you're playing Richard, I think it's a straight swap, exact same salary as Corey Davis. So you can definitely get aggressive there and hope that Jacobs is out. And then you end up overweight on two value plays that are really strong, but because the game locked at 425, it's not going to carry nearly the ownership as some of the other cheap running backs. And we get a lot of cheap running backs on this slate potentially. With other news as well, the Miami running back situation, the New York Jets running back situation are two other ones.
All right, well, let's stick on the Raiders for a second. So I actually think DeAndre Washington would be in line to probably see, in terms of snap share, it could end up 50-50 depending on how the game flow goes. If the Raiders fall behind a lot early, then we're going to see a lot of Jalen Richard on the field as the pass catching back. But he's never been used in the role of a guy who's going to get like 12 carries during a game. Like, I don't think that his role changes all that much. And DeAndre Washington doesn't necessarily step into the Josh Jacobs, I'm getting all the carries type role, but I could see him 15 plus carries in this game. And if he's just going to play, like, if they can keep this game close or potentially even lead a little bit, then there's a situation where I think DeAndre Washington could play around 70% of the snaps for the Raiders.
Yeah, I think what you see is DeAndre Washington takes like 80% of Josh Jacobs' role, and then the other 15 to 20% goes to Richard because the pass catching is so valuable on DraftKings. That's why I think fantasy-wise, they can look a little bit close to one another, even though I agree with you that the snaps themselves would be in favor of DeAndre Washington. Washington's who I would want. For one, he's $900 cheaper, which matters. And two, I think because he's going to get the rushing share, that's where the TD upside comes in. That's where you're going to hit more of a ceiling game, whereas Richard's your 5 for 40 guy with 20, 25 rush yards, and it's decent value, but it's not slate breaking by any means.
No,
should note.
I would say that DeAndre Washington's the only one that possesses slate breaking ability here, because I would assume he plays all the goal line packages, that if they do get up and they rush for touchdowns, it's going to be him, not Richard.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Hunter Renfro's out, here too. So they're a little bit thinner. And I wonder if they do end up going a little bit pass happier We could see the return of early season Darren Waller. I know I saw a tweet from Derek Carty where he was noting the splits with Waller versus Renfro and how his targets sort of have pivoted off of Renfro being in. So if they go a bit pass happier, so that's more attempts to go around. And then if you expect a higher target share because Renfro is not in, people are finally off Waller. The price hasn't really dipped back down to where it was early in the season. Could be a good low ownership tournament play.
Yeah, I used him last week. He went 7 for 100 last week against the Saints. So I don't think that there's going to be that much of a, hey, I don't want to play Waller. He's been so awful. I think people saw enough last week, and he's just cheap enough versus the very high-end options, even with the return of Austin Hooper, that I think that people will go to him. Although tight end seems to be the place where you can save the most money in general. And we'll get to tight end in a second because there's one guy who's the minimum that everyone seems to be gravitating towards this week. And that's where they're going to save their money. That I like Waller just objectively as a play, but I think I would rather pay down for that DeAndre Washington spot and pray that, I mean, you mentioned Jonnu Smith is $3,100. Tajay Sharp, if Adam Humphries does sit, which it does look like he's going to, is only $3,000 as well. That he becomes another guy that you could potentially pivot to in that game that's exactly the same price.
Yeah, he's a game time decision as well. So something to note there where the tight end side could be thin. So moral of the story, you should have options that are cheap late in this game and you should take advantage of that flexibility.
Okay, let's spin the opposite scenario because we've just been talking about what if Josh Jacobs sits. What if Josh Jacobs plays?
I feel like the comments I saw from Gruden was, so he missed practice Wednesday and Thursday.
And today.
And then Friday, I don't know what his official designation was, but they said he didn't do much. He's questionable, but Richard and Washington are a full go. It really sounds like even if he plays, he's going to be limited. I think I'd play the Tennessee guys if Jacobs was active, but my gut tells me that you're going to run into pretty good volume for Richard and Washington no matter what. But if he does play, I'm likely going to the Tennessee side just out of safety, where we know Corey Davis, as bad he's frustrating as he's been all season, is going to play a certain role. You've got Adam Humphries out. We know Jonnu Smith, that's the number one tight end there. Like, I'd probably play those guys over Washington and Richard if Jacobs is active, unless I was way behind and I really needed a smash, in which case I might just still go with DeAndre Washington and hope that Jacobs is this fake active and only plays in case of emergency or something like that.
I know Josh Jacobs is $6,500 on DraftKings this week, but you're going to get him at like 0.001 ownership. Like, is there any merit to actually playing him if he's active?
I don't think so. Like I said, the news flow out of there, it seems really pessimistic. And at times we get fooled by the coach speak and, we might think we're better at reading the tea leaves than we are. All that said, that's a tough price tag to begin with for his lack of involvement in the passing game this season. So I'm off Jacobs. I don't really see a scenario where I'd play Jacobs, even if he is mega low owned.
So the Miami situation right now, I had mentioned that Zach Zenner, we don't really know what's going on to him. Per fansharesports.com, the 4 highest owned running backs of this slate, the main slate on DraftKings, Mike, Patrick Laird is number 1, Devonta Freeman is number 2, Leonard Fournette is number 3, and James White is number 4. How is the most owned running back not Alvin Kamara?
Yeah, our projections certainly would have it be Alvin Kamara. We really like him this week. His targets the last 4 weeks, I think, have been 10, 10, 9, and 8. And a matchup against San Francisco, tough matchup. A lot of times in difficult defensive matchups, you're going to see more targets funneled to the running back position. They're at home, where historically much more efficient than they are on the road playing at home in this dome. So at that price tag, too, is really priced for two things. One, the matchup against San Francisco is fully taken into account with that price tag. And two, Kamara he's flat out run bad in terms of touchdowns this year. Just a variance thing. 2 years ago, we were saying the opposite. He's run really good. It's not like something has changed with Kamara where all of a sudden he can't score. And 2 years ago, he could do nothing but score. It's just bad variance. He's been on the wrong side of luck, and that's going to turn around sooner or later. I know I had him low owned against Tampa Bay a few weeks ago. He scored a touchdown, called back on holding, had a huge game, and somehow all the touchdowns went to other pieces. Sooner or later, it's going to come back, though, and we're going to get a multi-touchdown game from him. And really, only one touchdown is all you need with his contributions in the passing game. You're talking a running back that's getting a low 20% target share playing with Drew Brees, playing at home in a dome that's favorable for speed and for offense. Yeah, he's my number one guy this week.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be having the majority of my lineups with him in it. And if that means I can pay down for DeAndre Washington, are you in on this? And then I could probably maybe even get McCaffrey into those lineups. I don't know. I'll try to figure that out. That's usually how I lose my money every week, trying to jam McCaffrey in where I can't do it with another stud. And it doesn't turn out great. Although the last few weeks have been pretty good. Even though McCaffrey has come up short, he's still done better than most of the chalk running backs. So it all works out.
His floor is just so high. Last week he only scored 17. It was a disappointment, but nobody really went off last week, and it still worked out okay. And with the way this week's shaping up, where it seems like you're gonna get a couple cheap plays somewhere, yeah, I'm tempted to see if you could fit McCaffrey and Kamara together, but
I mean, I can. I mean, it's not that hard. You just pick the two of them and then pick the rest of your team and keep it under the salary
I'd say the tough aspect of that is I think I like Kamara better than McCaffrey straight up, and you might want to play 2 cheap running backs. And obviously you can't play 4 running backs. So that's going to leave you spending money at, tight end and wide receiver spots. And I think I'm leaning that way over playing McCaffrey, who I expect to be really, really chalky this week because of the ease in which you can play him and because people aren't on Kamara as much as they should be.
Well, if you put in McCaffrey and Kamara as your first 2, you still have $4,700 remaining. You chuck in a cheap defense in there, and I have a few cheap defenses I really like. So let's say I use the Chiefs D, who I like at 22. Then all of a sudden I have $5,100 left per player, and then I only need one of those cheap guys. I can still afford everyone I want to. So it's not that difficult to jam both those guys in. You brought up the New York Jets situation. Le'Veon Bell's missed the last 2 practices, Thursday and Friday, with an illness. I don't expect him to not play, though.
Usually when I see a guy miss with illness, you kind of brush it off. It's another situation where it didn't exactly get a ringing endorsement that he was going to play. It was kind of a we'll see sort of thing. I feel more confident that Jacobs misses than Bell misses. But if for some reason Bell were to miss, Bilal Powell, 3,500, a guy who catches passes going up against the Dolphins, quietly, we talked about this just before the show. Quietly, this game is becoming one of the most important games of the slate between. If Bell is out, you've got Powell. You've already got Laird on the other side with the Miami running back situation. Devontae Parker's shown a huge ceiling the last few weeks. And even in the Jets passing game, no one individually pops as super amazing, but Crowder, Demaryius Thomas, Robbie Anderson, you can make cases for all 3 of them at the respective price points. So it's a really interesting game from a DFS perspective. And we don't have a bunch of huge totals this week either. So getting, 2 teams that are priced pretty affordably that could shoot out a little bit relative to the other team totals, it's appealing from a DFS perspective.
So let's live in a world where Le'Veon sits, Jacob sits, and that's it. And you have these 6 guys available on your waiver wire to pick up and play this week in your season-long leagues. You have Bilal Powell, DeAndre Washington, Jalen Richard, LaShawn McCoy, Benny Snell, Darwin Thompson, and Patrick Laird. Which one do you think you would use? No price attached to them.
So I think if it's a standard league, I'd go Benny Snell against Arizona. I think the scoring upside for Pittsburgh's pretty strong there. DeAndre Washington's probably pretty close. If it's full PPR, I've been listening to too much Peter Oversight and too much Davis Maddock, but I might go with Laird because of his pass catching ability. Either him or Powell if it's full PPR.
I think I would lean Powell if I knew that Bell was going to be out. The thing is, I don't think that Bell's going to miss this game, so it's probably going to be somewhat irrelevant.
Are you worried about Ty Montgomery at all?
Not really. I would see it maybe I'd say at worst for Powell, and I could definitely be wrong on this, but like a 60-40 split at worst.
It's also you can get bailed out because it's Miami. So #analysis. They're playing Miami, and sometimes we overcomplicate these things. But if you're right on the volume, it's a really, really, really good play for Powell. If you're wrong on the volume and it's pretty even split, well, you're playing the Dolphins. You've got a decent shot at scoring mid-20s, and if that occurs, both running backs are probably doing decent from a fantasy perspective.
I think that the $4,100 Patrick Laird on DraftKings in the Millionaire Maker, because of everything that's happened this week, the price point that he's at, I think he's going to approach 20% ownership. I really do. I think he could be the highest owned running back on this slate. And that is just going to make me not play a single share of Patrick Laird.
It's sad, but if he is truly 20%, there's too many other options, too many other ways to build. I mean, even in the $5,000 range, Kenyon Drake's been catching a lot of passes for Arizona. Devonta Freeman, when he's been healthy over the second half of the season, he's had a workhorse type role, and that's a home dome game against Carolina that could go back and forth a little bit. And then we've already hit on backs that are cheaper than Laird. I mean, Bilal Powell, $600 cheaper. DeAndre Washington, $1,100 cheaper. I like Laird a lot because of his pass catching ability. And like I said, I think this game could shoot out a little bit. But if he's chalk, yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where there's enough uncertainty with all these situations when we haven't seen exactly how teams are going to allocate the volume that you want to play that uncertainty by using the situation that's least people have least exposure to and hoping that people are wrong on Laird. And if the volume, goes right for you on Powell or DeAndre Washington, whatever it may be, I think a lot of it will come down to how early do we get Jets news? How early do we get Raiders news? If we get it early enough, that could bring the Laird ownership back down to earth and have it be somewhat sane. But if we get, Jets news late, even though they're an early game, if we don't get it till inactives come out, people might not adjust properly. If we don't have the Oakland Raiders information by lock, again, make use of that flex. People aren't going to leave themselves the flexibility, and some people just won't swap even if they do leave themselves the flexibility. So the timing of when we get some of this news, I think will dictate the Laird ownership quite a bit.
I think people are just going to go onto him either way. I think people want to root for Patrick Laird, obviously, and he's so
That's
cheap.
fair.
He makes so many lineups end up working. But it's not like the Jets are a good matchup. They are through the passing game out of the backfield, but then if you take away some of the touchdown upside of Patrick Laird, how much do you think that Zach Zenner gets involved in this game? Could there be a situation where it's either Zenner leading the backfield, because we've seen a distribution between the Miami running backs all year long. Frankly, none of them have ever been good plays outside of one Kalen Ballage week where he snuck into the end zone for 2 touchdowns in a week where all the other running backs were absolutely terrible. So then you have a situation where it could look like you have, let's say, Patrick Laird as the pass catching back. You have Myles Gaskin as the goal line back, and Zach Zenner is the guy between the 20s, or switch out Gaskin and Zach Zenner as that guy. Then none of them are useful.
So I think I feel okay about the Laird workload. I really do. You mentioned we've seen a split in Miami, but they gave Ballage on consecutive weeks 80% of the snaps, and he's been terrible all season. He's been terrible last year, and they still gave him those snaps. And Patrick Laird, 60% of snaps with Ballage going down last week. They did use him by the goal line. And the critical part, he's going to be the pass catching back either way. If we get sniped a little bit on some rush attempts, a few goal line attempts, I don't think he's removed from the red zone completely, no matter what happens. Maybe he splits there and it's frustrating, but I think he's involved in some way there. Feel really confident he's the pass catching back. And this Jets defense, it's not a bad defense, but it's a little bit of a funnel defense. It's good against the run, bad against the pass. That's what you want if you're the pass catching back. You want to be in some 3rd and long situations because you ran for 2 yards on 1st and 10 or 2nd and 10. You want to be on the field catching some of those dump off passes where Laird could easily see 5 catches in this game. And if he sees 5 catches in this game, he's a favorite to go 3x at the 4,100 salary.
Okay, so he's $4,100. We know that both the Williams, not brothers, but let's just call them brothers, are out in the backfield for the Kansas City Chiefs. They signed Spencer Ware. He's no idea how much he's going to play, whether he's active or not. So you have Shady, who no one's going to play in the mid 4,000s. Then you have Darwin Thompson, who everyone wants to believe in, but everyone's just using Patrick Laird. As everything stands right now, if you had, let's say, and I'll be conservative on the estimate of projected ownership for Patrick Laird. Let's say you have a 13% Patrick Laird in the Millionaire Maker, or a 4% Darwin Thompson in the Millionaire Maker. I think Darwin Thompson's the better play.
I think it's pretty close to break even at those ownership percentages. The KC situation's tough. We were kidding in our internal content Slack channel where we're, going through the projections each week for Daily Roto. that, the reason to be positive towards Darwin Thompson is they seem like they hate LaShawn McCoy, and the reason to be positive towards LaShawn McCoy is they seem like they hate Darwin Thompson. They don't really seem like they want to play either of these guys that much, and now they might not have a choice, even though I know they did bring Spencer Ware into the fold. You wouldn't expect him to get much run just joining the team this past week. I think I'll take Laird at 13%. I don't think that discrepancy is big enough. If we get Laird to 15 plus and you're going to guarantee me like 3% on Darwin, I might change my mind, but I think we're like right at the equilibrium point with Laird at 13 and Darwin at 4. Pretty good example of that.
I think that Darwin Thompson outscores him anyway.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
So,
I just look at how Kansas City has attacked the Patriots the last 2 times they've played them. I know the defense is better this year, but it's a similar type situation. I'll take the player in the better offense for one thing. You can't guarantee me that Patrick Laird's going to play 75% of the snaps. Like, if there's a situation where Darwin Thompson plays 70% of the snaps, that's in the realm of possibility. And they've just gashed New England on backfield passes. I mean, what else would you have Darwin Thompson do in your offense rather than catch passes out of the backfield? Like, that's it. Like, they're going to both play a similar role. I'll take the guy in the better offense, even if it is a tougher matchup.
So you say that they'll play a similar role, but I would definitely make Darwin a dog to Laird on touches. I think
overall, but
I feel pretty confident that Laird touches are more than Darwin touches.
Potentially so, but how valuable is any Patrick Laird rush, honestly, unless it's at the 1 yard line. And you can't necessarily put that in, but the Jets have a better run defense than the Patriots do. And Patrick Laird, even last week, I mean, he's averaging like 0.5 yards per carry.
All right. So at the end of the day, though,
if the reason to play him is because of receiving prowess, I mean, what he does on the ground is basically irrelevant unless he scores a touchdown. He's just not going to get you that sort of yardage on the ground to make a difference. I'd rather have the guy in the better offense who's probably going to score more points. Like, the highest projected point total game of this week is Patriots-Chiefs.
Okay, but I bet you'd be surprised at how close the team totals are. Team total for Kansas City, 23. What's the team total for Miami here?
It has to be less. There's 6-point dogs on the road in a lower
21 for Miami, 23 for KC. That's a lot closer than you would have expected, though.
That doesn't even make any sense to me. Like, the Chiefs are 3-point dogs in New England in a game that's a 49 over-under. The Dolphins are 5.5-point dogs in a game that's projected to score 4 points less. It can't be that close.
Well, maybe I have it wrong then.
I mean, just saying that out loud, like, that would lead you to believe that they wouldn't be that close, would it?
I think that Miami's right around 20.5 to 21, and KC's at 23. So we have Miami at 5-point dogs right now. So maybe they dropped a little bit if it's 5.5 points. But either way, they're both in the low 20s. Like, Kansas City obviously has more scoring upside, but it's closer than you would have expected. On any other week, you're talking a team total difference of like 10, whereas it's kind of close this week. So, I wouldn't be surprised, and we might even have it this way, if Laird had more TD upside than Darwin Thompson. Like, the guys that Laird is competing for touchdowns for, it's not Travis Kelce, it's not Tyreek Hill, it's not, I won't even say Sammy Watkins because he's dead to me, and you've got LaShawn McCoy there. I'm more worried about LaShawn McCoy taking goal line touches from Darwin than I'm worried about Myles Gaskin taking goal line touches from Patrick Laird.
Potentially so, but you also have the fact that Ryan Fitzpatrick enjoys calling his own number. It's sort of like the Josh Allen, Devin Singletary corollary.
Yeah, I mean, it's close, but it just comes down to I'm more confident in the touches for Laird than for Darwin. I will say that if you're right on Darwin and he ends up playing 60% of the snaps, yeah, give me Darwin at 60% of the snaps for KC versus Laird at 60% of the snaps for Miami. But I think that the appropriate line in terms of playing time and touches, the discrepancy is wide enough that I'll take Laird, and even though it's the Miami offense versus Darwin and the KC offense.
Here's the thing. I don't think that either of them are like great plays at all. Like, I might not use either of them. I just wanted to get the argument between those two and how to construct lineups. That's
fair. This is one of the more interesting weeks. I did a cage match thing with Al Zeidenfeld where we went back and forth as like a snake draft salary cap head to head. And I'm looking at our projections, for example, at running back, a lot of weeks and this year it's happened a few times, but this week in particular, we just have a lot of crowded values after Kamara. And some of the values that we like near the top of those crowded values are guys people aren't going to play. Like Devonta Freeman, I don't think is going to be popular.
I haven't projected as the second highest owned guy after Laird.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so I could be wrong there, but someone like Kenyon Drake, people aren't going to play for sure. Like no one's playing Kenyon Drake. And
okay. Well, let me throw this out to you then. So we talked about all these values at running back. What if the move, like I mentioned, is just a double pay up at running back, avoid all these value guys who frankly could all bust because none of them are actually any good, and then just have an even keel team at receiver, and that's your contrarian build. You don't have to worry about ownership at that point, just because your build is so much different than everyone else's.
Yeah, that you need to find the right receivers. I need to like actually build this out and see how it looks. But actually, I'll quickly just lock Kamara and Freeman and see what it looks like. Kamara and McCaffrey.
You would end up with like Zach Pascal, Jamison Crowder, AJ Brown, Christian Kirk, Robbie Anderson, Tyler Boyd, all the way up to
one way you could do it is if you like Humphreys is out, if Sharp is game time decision maybe out, you could probably double stack Tannehill very easily with a Kamara McCaffrey bill. But as I'm looking at him,
I don't even think you need to go that cheap at receiver if you really want to. Like there's enough there's enough independent value
optimal.
There's enough independent value. One sec. There's enough independent value at receiver cheap, I think, whether it's Auden Tate or Paris Campbell is now going to play. He's $3,000 or $3,200 against Tampa.
Yeah, and if you're willing to take the cheap tight end, our top optimal is actually a nuke Deshaun Watson stack with Kamara McCaffrey. So there's definitely that flexibility. And that's with DeAndre Washington and flex if you assume Josh Jacobs is out and you just use one of those cheap running backs. So yeah, I guess that's appealing. Pick the right cheap running back. Hope the rest of them are, even if they're fine, even if they hit value, they don't necessarily win you a tournament. If McCaffrey has a McCaffrey day, and Kamara, we just have already discussed, we both think he's the best value on the entire slate. I'm starting to warm up to this. I guess my only slight hesitation is I think McCaffrey is going to end up just monstrously owned because of all the cheap running backs.
Okay,
but the construction itself might end up unique because he'll probably be owned with like double cheap running backs.
Exactly. Or you can just say screw Christian McCaffrey and have Kamara with Cook or have McCaffrey with Fournette, and then it's the same principle of double paying up, but you save yourself money.
Where do you think the Cook ownership's going to be? I'm struggling with like Cook versus McCaffrey.
I don't know now where he's been lifted from the injury report that there's going to be no limitations on Dalvin Cook. At least that's what Mike Zimmer says. I can see I don't know if necessarily more people are going to own him than Christian McCaffrey, but I can see it being super close. So as chalky as you might think Christian McCaffrey may be, that extra $800 at the very top, now that we know that Dalvin Cook could be okay, I wonder if I can make a McCaffrey, Cook, and Kamara lineup. Now there's a lineup, Mike. This is where my mind's going to.
I feel like, well, it kind of depends on how some of these situations break, but I feel like you're probably going to want to take a chance on one of the running back situations, especially because some of these guys catch passes.
No. McCaffrey, Kamara, Dalvin Cook, lock it in. There's your lineup. Start there and just move on.
I just want to see what this looks like.
I can actually build a pretty good team with it. Not a pretty good team, but I can build a team that I don't hate with this.
You know
it requires using
the market.
One second, it requires using Ian Thomas as my tight end though is the problem. Who is projected to be the highest owned tight end this week.
But yeah, again, you can do like the double Tannehill stack works with like if you use Jonnu Smith, Corey Davis at 3,900 is going to break me this week. I'd rather use Paris Campbell. That is the one guy that was contested quite a bit when we were setting projections where, Davis was really pro Paris Campbell, but Davis is generally pro the young athletic guy. It's not really shocking there. Whereas Drew is like, well, I'm looking at the data and I don't see how we get the target share on Paris Campbell higher than on Marcus Johnson, who's a UDFA, but he's been playing 90% of the snaps. He's been playing solely outside. And I don't know. I'm torn there because my heart says, yeah, play Paris Campbell. This is a team that's desperate versus a bad Tampa Bay secondary, really good Tampa Bay run defense. So they're going to throw a lot. Paris Campbell's the guy you're going to use on gadget plays and whatnot too, so you should get some cheap points there. But right now, the way we have it projected, Marcus Johnson just takes away enough volume from Paris Campbell that it ends up looking like a little bit of a stretch, at least on paper.
So I can fill out a team with McCaffrey, Cook, and Kamara if I use guys like Auden Tate, Paris Campbell, and Ian Thomas. And then you have, let's see, and if you pay down for a cheap defense, I do like the Chiefs. I like the Bengals as well. But then you would have 5,700 left for a quarterback and receiver. That's not the end of the world.
No,
it's not. It's not optimal, but you get the 3 best running backs on your team.
You need the expensive wide receivers to have a bad day, which isn't the craziest thing in the world for them to not go ham. But
no, you don't need them to have necessarily bad days. You just need all 3 of those running backs to be the 3 running backs, because no one else is going to have those 3 running backs in the same lineup. And you could even change, like I said, you could change Cook to Leonard Fournette instead, and then all of a sudden you have like 6,600 left for quarterback and receiver.
I think what ends up happening, though, is of all the cheap running backs we talked about, unless the news breaks, like if Bell plays, if Josh Jacobs plays, maybe this works where you're fading basically just Laird at that point. And I guess Laird and the KC guys. But if Bell's out and Jacobs is out, I just feel like you can't fade all the cheap running backs. I think one of them is going to hit.
You can fade them all. One of them's going to hit.
One of them's going to hit.
You're not going to know, but you're not going to know which is which. Like, I'm not playing 150 lineups. I'm playing.
But somebody's going to hit it. You're not going to win, though. I think you're better off guessing on which one's the right one.
No, I think I'd rather take, if I'm playing my 10 lineups against 150 lineups, I think I'd rather go with this build that no one else is going to have with good players and at least good running backs in it. I'd rather chance it on wide receivers. Wide receivers are chancier anyway. I would rather take an expensive running back knowing I can project out their volume much better than I can do of all the top end receivers. Like, Mike Evans is a great play this week. Devontae Parker is a great play this week. But if you told me at the end of the week they both had 8 points, I'm not going to be super stunned. If Dalvin Cook doesn't get hurt this week and he gets his normal workload, if he ended up with 8 points, my head would explode. I'd be like in tremors.
Yeah, I think it depends a little bit what contest you're playing. I think if you're playing a smaller field contest, maybe this strategy works out a little bit better where you don't need the perfect lineup. You just need a few players to fail in certain spots and the running backs to do their things. And all of a sudden you're cashing high. That makes sense. But if you're throwing this in the Million Maker, I just don't know if you can get there. I just think one of the cheap running backs comes through and it's going to be minus EV to play a lineup without taking a chance on one of the cheap running backs, even though I know you're not playing a ton of lineups, you're only playing one, and you don't feel great guessing which of those running backs you should play. I still think you should take that chance.
Well, let me ask you, what would you say the percentage-wise, one guy versus another guy of who scores more points? Patrick Laird or Auden Tate?
I'd say, oh man.
Like 60-40? I'd say it's close to 50-50.
60-40 is what came to my mind at first. Yeah, 60-40.
So if it's 60-40 in favor of Laird, I actually think it's closer than that, but I would still take the 40% chance on Tate if I knew that one guy was going to be, I get a different position. Like, not only do you get to fade a chalky running back, you just get to use another running back in a spot now where you can pay up because you're paying down at receiver in a spot where you would then out. Like, if you use Auden Tate as your flex, as your very last man in instead of Darwin Thompson or Patrick Laird or one of the cheap running backs, like, I don't think he's that big of a dog versus those guys.
I think it's 60-40, 65-35. But regardless, like the type of math you're doing, this is how I get myself in trouble sometimes, though, is, yeah, if it's 60-40 and one guy is going to be way lower owned and in a more unique roster construction, you take that guy. But you start making that decision in each lineup spot, all of a sudden you're just drawing thin for all of those things to happen at the same time.
Yeah, but the whole discussion that I wanted to have here was, can you jam in 3 stud running backs in a week where everyone is paying down at running back? Just because that makes that just makes your team so much different. Then you don't need to worry about ownership at all.
It can be done. It's weird that the beginning of this week, I didn't think ownership was even going to matter all that much. I thought it was going to be really spread out. And now as we're getting to the tail end of the week, groupthink always starts to converge a little bit on some of the right plays. I do think ownership's going to matter a little bit more.
I think it only matters at running back, to tell you the truth, and that dictates the rest of the way that it's going to go. Like, I don't have a single quarterback projected over 10%. Tight end's pretty flat. Defense is pretty flat. Receiver, frankly, is pretty flat outside of, like, DJ Moore and Devontae Parker and Robbie Anderson. Those are like the three popular guys that everyone's going to use. But after that, like it's
such easy fades too. If you're,
I don't think that Parker is an easy fade. I think Parker is legit good. I think he's underpriced.
He is carrying my one lone best ball team that's still alive, but man, but I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick throwing to a $6,900 receiver. I know Devontae Parker has been great. I like Devontae Parker, but if that's chalk, I think that's an easy fade. I feel like those are all pretty easy fades if they're chalk at their price tags.
Like, would you?
I mean, Devontae Parker
you want to
versus
use
like Julian Edelman. I mean, it's like the same price. DeAndre Hopkins is $7,400.
Yeah, but if
$500 more, I don't know. I think it's pretty thin on Parker if he's remotely chalky.
Okay, well, let's talk about the injury.
I do like the game. If you're game stacking, play Parker. But if you're not game stacking and he's chalky, he's not a guy to use as a one-off.
Okay, so receiver injury report: Mohamed Sanu, Julio Jones, John Ross, Golden Tate, AJ Brown, Marquise Brown, and Pally Campbell are all likely to play. Adam Thielen, Devin Funchess, Paul Richardson, Jakeem Grant. Jakeem Grant is definitely out. Trey Quinn, Hunter Renfrow, Adam Humphries, Nelson Aguilar now, who's been placed on the injury report, hasn't practiced all week. We'll know a better idea on Saturday because they play in the Monday night game. They're all not likely to play at this point. Chester Rogers, AJ Green, Scotty Miller for Tampa. So Brashad Perriman, look out there. Deshaun Jackson, T.Y. Hilton, and Juju are all officially out. There's not like any sort of pickup receiver, but I do think that Campbell over someone like, what the hell is that other guy's name? Marcus Johnson? Is that a guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
real life human being.
I think that Paris Campbell, now back healthy from the hand injury, would get the start over Marcus Johnson. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, you have more flexibility with Paris Campbell. You can play outside, can play in the slot. Like I said, they're going to run gadget plays. I think I'm on Team Campbell, but it is probably closer than it seems at first. If you just take a look at the guy who's been playing a ton of snaps and been seeing a decent target share, but I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if that just ended up a trap and the Colts didn't provide a whole ton of value and they disappointed a lot of people. I actually like the Tampa Bay defense at 2,300, a decent bet.
I guess we'll talk about defenses in a second. You like the Tampa Bay D? I would prefer the Chiefs and Bengals defense.
Chiefs and Bengals. I think it's a go cheap D week in general.
Unless
I like Tampa Bay more. Just you look at all the injuries the Colts have had. They're going on the road. I don't know. I think Tampa Bay is the best of the options, but I'm not gonna have this crazy strong conviction on a cheap D play. Like they could all be bad, whatever.
If you can get there, I do think that the Steelers at 3,500 is the best defense of the week.
So I'm a little bit on Arizona as a contrarian stack this week.
I like Arizona to win this game, but I just think it's like 17-10 or something. And Kyler, even when he performs well, gives up fantasy points to the opposing defense because he takes so many sacks.
Take sacks, at times they can be very pass happy, which is exactly what you want is a team being pass happy, because really the points allowed doesn't matter a ton. Only on like the extreme ends does it really have a tangible difference. It's about those sacks and those turnovers. But Kyler at 1% owned with, Kirk is always going to carry a little bit of ownership, but I have an affinity for Kyler with either Kirk or Fitzgerald and bring it back with Deontay Johnson as a really cheap mini game stack.
I just don't think that's a game you want to go to in terms of stacking, to tell you. Like, it would be like 8th on my list of all the games on this slate.
It's cheap, though. It's cheap. Those three guys combined.
It's cheap, but like Pittsburgh legit doesn't score points.
Dude, Duck Hodges says he's a gunslinger at heart. Come on.
Well, let's see it in practice. So he's a theoretical gunslinger.
Theoretically, he's a gunslinger. But Deontay Johnson, same amount of targets as James Washington the last 2 weeks. A lot of people are on James Washington. Deontay Johnson's way cheaper. Arizona bleeds fantasy points. I don't know. I think if Kyler has a good game, things could get sped up a little bit. But it could very easily go the wrong way. I just think there's a chance it goes the right way and nobody's going to play that.
I do think that Deontay Johnson is probably the piece of that game you want that's not Benny Snell from the Steelers side, but Benny Snell's super expensive, so you're probably not going to play him anyway. Like, if you can get Melvin Gordon or Benny Snell around the same price point, I think you might want to go against a guy playing the worst run defense.
I've heard a lot of Melvin Gordon talk this week, and I don't know. I don't really get it. Are you in on him?
I'm thinking about it, depending on how I want to construct my lineups. But like, if we just go back and look what he's getting, like 20 attempts, 14 attempts, 22 attempts, 20 attempts, at least 2 catches in every single one of those games, except for one. That's the game that he had the 22 touches. Like, he's going to get the goal line work if they get down close. Like, Jacksonville's just not stopping anyone on the ground.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are looking to rush DVOA of Jacksonville, and I don't know. I think that price range at 6,400, I just have a really tough time utilizing him with Austin Eckler still in certain situations getting a lot of play. They seem to always be in close games where they need to bring Eckler in for pass catching. You know, in the past, we've seen Melvin Gordon at 14% target share, even with Austin Eckler there. You know, our baseline for him is just barely 10%. So I know it's still a couple catches, and it might sound like I'm quibbling over small details, but I don't know. I think you're going to need a pretty efficient game. And does it look like on paper that'll be an efficient game? Yes, but when people start group thinking on an efficiency play, I don't know. I'm worried. And I know your point is it's more than efficiency, it's volume. You look at all the carries he's getting, but you know, carries generally, you know, they just don't mean a lot unless you're getting to the 100-yard bonus, unless you're getting a lot of goal line carries. And he has the potential to do that, but I think it's going to end up being overowned.
All right, well, in a hypothetical situation, would you rather play Patrick Laird and Devontae Parker or Deontay Johnson and Melvin Gordon? I know, just throw out who the guys are, but like that type of player. It doesn't need to be Devontae Parker. It can be DJ Moore, let's say. DJ Moore and Patrick Laird, since it's not teammates, or Melvin Gordon and Deontay Johnson. I would take the Melvin Gordon, Deontay Johnson side. Like, I don't know who
take
you're
the Laird, DJ Moore side.
Really?
I think so.
Wow. All right. You're better at this than I am, so maybe I should be listening to you on it.
Pat, what's happened to you? Usually you're a sucker for these cheap pass catching backs.
I am, but like, I just don't think that Patrick Laird is very good, man. You were on this 2 weeks.
You're doubting him.
You were on this 2
3
weeks.
times he shall be denied.
Like, listen, he had a good week last week when no one played him. I just really have no interest in like people. If he didn't appear on Davis's podcast this week and everyone downloaded it and everyone listened to it, which I recommend that everyone go do. It's a great podcast. But now that everyone likes Patrick Laird, they just want to use him on DraftKings and use him in their season-long lineup. Like, they're just over-projecting him to such an extent and using him that he's just not worth it.
It's totally fair. We're all going to pay the rate just so we can all say we had him in our lineups.
Yeah, and listen,
like an 80% Patrick Laird, we're all rooting for him.
Good on you if you use Patrick Laird. He comes through, scores 2 touchdowns for like 20 DraftKings points. That'd be amazing. I'd be happy for Patrick Laird. I lose every week anyway, so it's not that big of a deal if I lose. But if you can win doing it, you know, frankly, that's good enough. I think that just proper strategy would be to not use him in this situation. What about Diggs? Because Thielen's not going to play. Detroit sucks. Yes, he's probably going to get Slay in this game, but I'm not really too concerned about that. And I don't think very many people are going to use Diggs. Like, if I look at the top of receiver, which I don't know if a lot of people are going to go up to the very top, but Evans is going to be owned. Hopkins is going to be owned. Julio is going to be owned. That's probably it. DJ Moore, Devontae Parker, they're both going to carry ownership. Like Michael Thomas, Tyreek Hill, Stefan Diggs, I can just see people overlooking them.
Yeah, I think so. He doesn't pop for us in terms of median projection. You know, not someone you'll use for a cash game, but at home, you know, in a dome environment with Kirk Cousins playing extremely well the last, 8 weeks or so. It's been a pretty consistent run now. Do they have the highest team total on the week too? And they're like not going to be owned. I mean, people are going to play Cook, I guess, with him being cleared and quote unquote fully healthy.
If you played like a Cousins and Diggs stack, and that's all you wanted to do, and maybe bring it back with Golladay potentially, because he's the one that they use deep. If Mr. Blau can just chuck out some ducks to him, and Golladay comes down with one of them, he's another guy that no one's using. Like, It's expensive, although Kirk's not super expensive. But if you with all this value on the slate, like those are expensive guys you could go to. No one owns, who he said like are in like the even if you just want to use the Vikings guys and just use those two, Kirk and Diggs, like that could be good enough. I'm looking right now at the Daily Roto 90 percentile projections, and I don't want to give too much away, but Stefan Diggs is number 4 on that list. And I don't even think you guys have taken Thielen out yet.
Yeah, I think we might have taken Thielen out, but still, the point remains is if he's 4th there, people aren't going to use Diggs, and it's the highest team total of the week. That's part of the reason why the 90th percentile projection is high, because we've found historically, especially for receivers, that team total matters a lot. That's where you get those outlier, huge ceiling type performances. And Kirk Cousins, not that expensive, not going to be owned. If you wanted to double stack it too, you can play Rudolph. You could play maybe even Irv Smith as a really cheap tight end.
Or you can
they're both very fringe plays.
Or you can just get lucky and hope that Cook scores a receiving touchdown.
Yeah, you could double stack it with Cook. I think if you're saying, though, that Cook's going to start climbing towards McCaffrey, I think if I'm stacking Cousins, I'm doing it as like leverage off that, and I'm probably not going to use Cook. Like if you're MMEing, I think you are fine to double stack with Cook and a pass catcher. But if I'm doing single entry 3 max, I'm probably either going solo Diggs or Diggs and saying, hey, tight end's volatile anyway, so give me the correlation play and hope to get lucky.
5 highest projected receivers this week per fansharesports.com. Robbie Anderson, close to 20%. Devontae Parker, 18%. DJ Moore, 15%. Zach Pascal, 14%. Mike Evans, 14%. Any of those ownerships get you off of those guys? I would not use Robbie Anderson as the chalk wide receiver. I'll tell you that.
I mean, all of them, I could see all of them. Like, they're not our best plays as is. So if those guys are all going to be chalky, I'm off. Guys like Robbie Anderson are guys you play when they're not going to be owned, and you don't play when they're going to be owned, because they're really big play guys. A lot of variance there that makes them much tougher to project. So the weeks they seem like they're in a really good spot or seem like they're in a really bad spot, they're probably closer to the middle than on those ends of the spectrum, just because you're dependent on plays that are somewhat unpredictable to begin with. I guess quantity of pass attempts you can project a little bit, but that's not necessarily something you're projecting as 5.5 point home favorites against Miami. So I'm off him. I mentioned with the Colts, I think that whole thing could be a trap. I think Doyle could be a trap. People are looking to him after 10 targets last week with Ebron out, and they see this juicy matchup against Tampa Bay. But we've got stuff spread out there. We don't have them projecting very well just as a team. I could see them failing. DJ Moore, I love, but you're talking him up to $7K now. You can get Curtis Samuel for $2,100 cheaper than him. I think I'd rather play that at much lower ownership than a chalky DJ Moore. Mike Evans is like the really good version of Robbie Anderson in terms of play him when he's not owned and don't play him when he's owned. He's just very volatile. So, I mean, if those guys are going to be the chalk, give me the guys like DeAndre Hopkins, who's a little bit underpriced at 7,400. And I'm going to be a masochist and probably play Odell Beckham again this week.
Yeah, I mean, Jarvis Landry is just a better play, so maybe you just play him instead. But your point is well taken on that front. But if you want to play Robbie Anderson, just play Will Fuller instead, who no one's going to own. He'll be 1/20th the ownership of Robbie Anderson, and they're essentially the same guy.
Yeah, Will Fuller's better. Or at least he's playing with a better quarterback. So I'm not playing chalk Robbie Anderson. If chalk volatile receivers beat me, so be it. I think that's the way if you have a week, you can go in and all the chalk receivers are guys that are, yes, they have huge ceilings, but they're volatile and have pretty low floors. I think that's the week you're plus EV to just not play those guys because they could all fail. And then you're in a really, really juicy spot.
Quarterback injuries, not a ton. Baker Mayfield's going to play with his hand injury. Stafford and Daniel Jones are not going to play. So you get Eli, you get Mr. Blau under center for the Detroit Lions. As it pertains to DraftKings, it does seem like Fitz and Tannehill are the two that everyone's going to go towards because they're cheap. But like I mentioned, I don't have a single one projected over 10%, so you can basically take anyone you want. I do think that someone like Kirk Cousins is a super contrarian play because no one is using him. But especially with the weather picking up, probably the worst weather game of the week for Buffalo, Like, shouldn't we just use Lamar Jackson? He's great every week.
I was just going to say, is this the week people don't play Lamar? I mean, I run these every week for Daily Roto. I do an article where I sort of simulate the DraftKings scores for different players and how often the player is the top scorer. And Lamar Jackson practically breaks those sims because his rushing upside is so huge that week in, week out, he's got 5% higher probability than anyone else of being the top overall scorer at the position. And with everything spread out, yeah, I think he goes under owned. I don't like to say that because it'd be awesome if the Bills won this game as a Buffalo Bills fan. And, but at the end of the day, we just haven't seen a quarterback like this in fantasy, since Vic basically. And even then, it's a little bit different from that. I think because it's so ingrained and built into the offense and what they do, it's somewhat predictable a little bit week to week. He's going to get that yardage on the ground.
Yeah, you can just play naked Lamar on one side and bring it back with revenge game John Brown, and you're looking good.
Dude, we have John Brown as a top 10 value, and the initial ownership projection on him is like 1%.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's going to play him.
Yeah, I would actually tend to agree with you, although it's a really tough matchup for him.
It is, and we probably do have to do a weather doc there. That's the one game, as you said, with some weather concerns. It sounds like winds are going to be like 15 to 20 miles per hour, and try not to overreact to weather. But when you start getting 15 plus mile per hour sustained winds, the historical data does show teams are probably going to run a little bit more. The yards per attempt is going to come down a little bit relative to expectation, so that needs to be factored in. But hey, not the worst thing in the world to run a naked John Brown back on a naked Lamar team.
It's funny. I thought you said a naked John Rahm, and I was like, "Ooh, naked John Rahm. That's a big dude out on the field." But what about Drew Brees? 5,900. He'll never be cheaper. He's at home. It's the worst matchup on paper of the week. I still think he can be useful here, and he's another guy no one's using.
The New Orleans projections are driving me absolutely batty. I've taken like 3 looks at them this week and just trying to figure out the team level expectations, because we know historically at home, they just absolutely smash almost no matter who they play. And the pricing's really good. No one's talking about Michael Thomas either, and he's not crazy expensive, but they don't spit out well in our projections. And, a lot of that has to do with the matchup. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of it. Basically, all of that has to do with the matchup against San Francisco, and you get a much lower team total on New Orleans than you generally see at home. So I'm trying to balance the fact that they're at home, they're historically strong at home. Offense matters a little bit more than the defense matters, but at the same time, this is a really good defense. Vegas is clearly expecting a dock in efficiency from the New Orleans side of things because of where they've set the line and the total in this game. So I'm trying to balance all of those things, and what it spits out right now is Drew Brees, a guy who has no rushing upside in today's NFL when a lot of guys can run a little bit, even though he's really cheap, probably not the best play this week.
Okay. Any interest in Kelvin Harmon at wide receiver, just very quickly? Because he's also super cheap.
No, I'm not really on Haskins, and I know the recent target share for him has been a bit better, but no, Harmon isn't a guy that's really popped for me this week at all.
All right. Well, in that sort of same vein, we talked about all those cheap running backs. What are the chances Chris Thompson outscores them all?
Dude, I almost joked about Chris Thompson when I was talking about your love for cheap pass catching running backs. You've been trying to get Chris Thompson out of my mouth for years, I feel like, on this show. But I don't know. I think the chances that he has a really meaningful game are pretty low. I just think, with Geis there playing well now, I don't really see it. I know Thompson's going to be the pass catching back, but he's not catching as many passes as he has when he was, at his peak fantasy value. I'm not into it.
All right.
The thing is, a lot of these other guys have goal line work equity, on top of them.
That you think. You think
well,
they do.
It's possible, whereas I don't think it's possible for Chris Thompson. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Tight ends.
Like, we could be wrong, but we could be right.
The tight end injury report for the week. Ertz, Hooper, Evan Ingram, David Njoku now all look like they're going to play. Luke Wilson, Josh Oliver, and Rhett Ellison all look like they're not going to play, at least at this moment. The Giants and Philly guys, we're going to find out more on Saturday about them. Gerald Everett has been declared out. TJ Hawkinson is out. And Greg Olson is out with a concussion. That leaves the 3 highest projected owned tight ends on DraftKings this week: Doyle, Ian Thomas, and Darren Waller. So, again, I think this week, if Doyle and Thomas are going to be 1 and 2, do you have any issues with using Ian Thomas at the bare min?
No, and I think if you're eating chalk at tight end, it might as well be really cheap chalk. It's such a fragile position. Everyone can go bad, which is a reason not to play chalk there. But if I'm going to do it, it might as well be really cheap chalk, because I'm fine with Ian Thomas, even if he's chalk. I don't know if it's someone I'll own heavily, but I think of the 3 guys you mentioned, if they're all chalky, Ian Thomas is the one I'm most likely to use.
Would you go to someone like Higbee? Again, I know he's not playing the Cardinals. Actually, he's not even on this slate, so don't worry about him. In season long, if you had to pick between them, would you go Thomas or Higbee?
I would go Higbee. I mean, we saw the absolutely massive ceiling last week that I don't think you get out of Ian Thomas. So,
yeah, and I do think that Ian Thomas is by far the best of these pay down guys, because there's not even a ton in the 3,000 level this week. I guess Njoku's 35 if you wanted to gamble. That's probably just a bit too much for me.
That's too much of a gamble. I still really like Noah Fant. And, last 4 games, he's had over a 20% target share. Really, really athletic tight end. Give me volume for a cheap tight end who can break a big play, at low ownership. I like him a lot in tournaments.
You don't worry about Drew Lock at all? Although the Texans' pass defense sucks, so.
I do worry about Drew Lock, but it's one of those things where if no one's going to play him, give me the targets and the athletic upside. And if Drew Lock sucks and brings him down, so be it. But I think the upside is still with the other cheap plays, or even higher than the other cheap plays.
If I was going to use a Denver running back or Denver player this week, I would actually just find the money and play Cortland Sutton. You can play him every single week. He's really good. He's having sort of like a run like Devontae Parker's run has been more highly publicized, but Cortland Sutton's basically been just as good.
Yeah, he's been absolutely phenomenal. I think he's in play in tournaments. Not at the top of my list, but it's hard to argue with what he's done, regardless of who's been throwing the ball.
So Vance McDonald week against the Cardinals hasn't really materialized in the way that I thought that it would. Will you use Vance McDonald? Because I'm kind of out on Vance McDonald.
I think I'm out. 4,300. They're starting to price these guys up against the Cardinals. I don't know. I'm out. If he was 3,500, I'd be in, but I'm not in at 4,300.
All right, if you want in 2 under-owned plays this week, I don't know how much I love them, because I might gravitate towards the Doyle or Ian Thomas chalk, because I think both those guys are good plays, and depending on how much I need. If I can get up, I'll try to get up to the top to the Wallers or Hoopers of the world. But I think that Ryan Griffin and Mike Gesicki in the low 4,000s, 4,100, 4,000, are both in excellent spots in that game, and those are the 2 pieces of that game that no one seems to be using.
If I were to pick between those 2, it'd be Gesicki. I think he has the athletic profile to have, to absolutely go off. And, Griffin's a guy that I've been monitoring when we set our efficiency baselines each week. And I've taken a look at him as he's performed really well. He's just run so pure on touchdowns that I think he's overpriced now. And a lot of the production that he's seen is a bit fluky and likely to continue.
Yeah, I was kind of debating, because we didn't bring up Alan Hearns at receiver, who's $4,100, just if we want to get access to low-owned parts of this game. I think I would go with Gesicki, who is in the past 4 games, at least 6 targets in all of them, and against the Jets, it's not bad.
Not at all. What do you think about Kittle, though? I think this could be Kittle week if he's not going to be chalk.
I would tend to agree. Levitan and I talked about this on the. It's just hard to get up to him because he's $5,900. I guess if you can make the room for 58 for Waller, just pay for Kittle instead because he's better.
Yeah, he also. I know he's been dealing with injuries all year long, but 100% of snaps last week was really encouraging to me. So, you talk about a guy that can go nuts. We have him the highest projected target share at the position. He has the most yak upside of any tight end, basically ever, that we've seen play the game. So if you're going to tell me he's I thought Waller was going to be low owned, but if he all of a sudden is gaining steam with the Renfro injury and whatnot, I liked him as a tournament play if he wasn't going to be owned. If he's going to be the chalk, I would much rather pivot to Kittle. And we like Waller. Our DR projections have him and Doyle as like the top values, but we've just got that position so tightly clustered that I think there's also something not present in the data for Kittle's ceiling that we just know historically he can make these really big plays that you generally don't see at the position.
We haven't brought up any of the Kansas City guys on this show, or they've been dismissed sort of outright right away. Is that just a mistake? Like, could you win $1 million this week stacking Mahomes, Kelsey, and Hill?
Yeah, I think any week KC's not going to be owned because, and this is again where the offense matters a little bit more than the defense. With the projection system, it's hard again to strike that balance between, okay, this is where Mahomes is, yards per attempt baseline is, and how many touchdowns they usually throw versus, oh, well, their team totals down to 23 this week, but there's, such a phenomenal offense that if they're able to, dictate this game, and if anyone's going to go off in a really difficult matchup, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes. I think it's interesting. Then it's also pretty easy to bring back Edelman and just hope he catches like 15 balls. So if you were making MME mix, I would play it. I probably won't play it in single entry 3 max though.
No, probably not for me either. But if I end up doing like 10 lineups or something like that, I might allocate 2 of them to that type of stack.
Yeah, I would definitely bring someone back on it. You have to if you're going to do that.
So it'd be Edelman or James White, I suppose. White would be cheaper.
Yeah, and White is the guy that would fit the game script that you're looking for. If Mahomes goes off, it's the game script we saw last week where White played like the entire second half, and I locked him in Showdown and barely made any money because I stink.
You use your captain in Showdown and you didn't make money last week?
I locked him in. I liked him in all lineups, but not as captain specifically.
So you gotta leave that to Drewby. Drewby will just win all the money.
I know.
Did you know that
I've tried to come up with all these ways to beat him, but
did you know that I've stopped playing Showdown because I figured out that I just can't beat him, so I'm just not going to play?
There's 55,000 entrants, but it doesn't matter because there's one guy I'm not going to beat, and there's no point in playing.
Exactly. Well, who's the guy at Grinders who's killing it as well?
Tony.
JT. Is it Big T?
I think it's Big T.
There's someone at Grinders who's gonna. Yeah, it is. Yeah,
I know Drewby was joking because there was like before the Showdown slate, he was like drinking beers and playing like one of those arcade games. And Drewby's like, my nemesis, I'm out here grinding at my computer, and he's just out chilling at a bar before the contest locks.
Yeah, it's Tony, Big T44 DFS on Twitter if you want to follow. Tony's a good dude, loves the challenge, and apparently very good at Showdown. So there's 2 guys that I can't beat, along with the other 50,000 people who I also can't beat. So another reason to not play Showdown for me. Let's talk about defenses though. Before we get out of here, I have mentioned I like Kansas City a lot. I like Kansas City in this game. Am I just such a fish for using Kansas City?
I don't know. They're fine. I'm not super into them. They're on the road. I don't think they're a good defense. I think the reason why they're a good fantasy defense is because they play in a lot of positive game scripts for them where they can just unleash the pass rush like we saw last week against Oakland where
can I give you my case?
Can
I give you my case for the Chiefs this week? Okay.
Let's hear it.
So they're 3-point underdogs, which would lead you to believe that they're not going to get very many cracks at Brady. Because like we saw in like a sort of a shitty weather game against Dallas when Raza needed Dallas D to really be on like the pressure. They needed Brady to be throwing, and that just didn't happen. I think that the Chiefs are going to win this game. I don't think that the Patriots, at least in this match up very well. Maybe when it comes playoff time and it's a little bit colder, maybe that's a different scenario. And I do need to track the weather on this game. But if I play in a world where the Chiefs get up early, even if it's 10-0 early or 14-3, something like that, the Patriots do play one of the fastest games in terms of snaps per game. They have some of the most. So if they get behind, they're going to be throwing a ton. Even if it's dink and dunk type stuff, I don't really care. You mentioned the Chiefs pass rush. It's very good. Their pass defense overall, it's okay. Their run defense kind of sucks. But if you take away that element from the Patriots and you make Brady pass like 40, 45 times in this game, you have a situation where their offensive line is banged up. They haven't reintegrated Isaiah Wynn yet. They've lost their center. I just don't think they can block for them. And just maybe the Patriots are no good. Maybe that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's anytime you can talk yourself into the other team throwing a bunch. I'm fine with playing that in tournament because pass attempts are where the upside is generated from. So I'm fine with it from that perspective. I just see, a high total against or defense on the road. And as bad of a feeling as the market in general has about the Patriots offense right now, they're still 10th in offensive DVOA, which maybe you're buying into, maybe you're not, but I don't think they're complete dust yet. And
I don't think they are, but I think I'd be willing to gamble on the chance that they could be.
yeah, I wonder who you think is going to be chalky because like I like Baltimore a lot at 2,900. Again, I hate picking on my Bills, but a lot of Josh Allen's success is coming against teams that just aren't that good. Huge game against Dallas, national TV game. People are all buying in. And then we saw Mitch Trubisky put up a crazy game against them as well. And then it dampens, your optimism from that performance a little bit. Now you get him in game with some wind to it. Really, really high profile game. A guy that, can make some mistakes, even though he hasn't recently. I like Baltimore at 2,900. And a lot of people are probably going to go really cheap. That might deflate the ownership a little bit. I don't think it'll be like Megalome, but I'm hoping it's not chalk either.
I got some bad news for you, Mr. Mike. 3 highest projected owned defense, and defenses are probably the highest to project. So, and none of them are like 30%. They're like 12, 13%. Packers, Ravens, Colts. 1, 2, 3.
Okay. I see the Colts play a lot. Like, I get why people are going there. It's super cheap, and Jameis just has the type of events that are good for opposing defenses. Takes some sacks, turns the ball over. Even if he can put up a lot of points and throw for a lot of yards, again, what we care about are those sacks and turnovers. So I get the Colts play.
So I like I said, I think the Steelers are objectively the best play at 3,500. They're just hard to get to because that's a lot to pay for a defense. I like the Saints at 3,100. I just think they're flying under the radar. They can pressure the quarterback. We know that, and Jimmy G might not actually be good. So that's a thing. The Ravens, like you mentioned, I do like them in this spot, but the Chiefs, the Bengals, 2,200, 2,100. Like, what if Baker's hand isn't okay? He throws picks anyway. And the Bengals have shockingly generated a ton of pressure on the quarterback the past 3 weeks, which, that's something to look at against Baker. They have a terrible offensive line.
Yeah, and they've just, for whatever reason, they've just been so inconsistent all year long that any cheap defense against them, I'm fine with. I'm more on board with Cincinnati than I am with KC. I still like Tampa Bay. I think the best of the really cheap defenses. Taking a look, though, I don't know. I mean, you can kind of roll the dice. I don't want to make it sound like I have these huge convictions because it's just so highly variant at defense. I don't know. There's a few plays I think are really bad. And then after that, it's kind of like play whoever you want.
Can I, and this might come back to bite me, but if you're not going to have a hot take, why have a take at all? I think the Packers defense is a bad play this week.
Okay, I'll say... Are people not going to play Minnesota at all?
No, they're not. And that was going to sort of be my next point, that this Vikings game in general is just one that no one is paying attention to.
They're just like, we can't figure out, Detroit stinks, but blah was good enough that we're just going to avoid. Yeah, this game does seem ripe for the picking in a lot of different ways, where if you were making, 10 teams, as you said, you could play different ways of Minnesota succeeding in a few different, like Minnesota D with Cook on one. Cousins double stack, bringing Galladay back on one. That game is starting to get more appealing.
So the reason I don't like the Packers defense, just so I actually put some, color behind any of this, it doesn't matter what the Skins do. They're going to run the ball. They could be down by 30 points and they're going to run the ball. And like you mentioned, you want to be facing teams with pass volume. Yes, maybe 17 dropbacks from Dwayne Haskins is equivalent to someone else dropping back 50 times in terms of potential upside for pick sixes. I'll grant you that. But I think you can run on the Packers. I think they can be successful. And if you're going to face a team that's going to run the ball 40 to 45 times during the game, and ditto for the Texans this week too, if people are thinking about them, because Denver's just going to run the ball. Not only do you have fewer opportunities to generate turnovers on teams that are just running the ball, the clock also just runs the entire game, and you just see fewer plays overall, which is not what you want. Yeah, the Packers could win this game 27-0, but they could score 10 points only just because they shut them out. And you don't need playing for 3 points against, because that's so dicey.
Yeah, so we have a decent projection on the Packers, but to back up what you're saying, we have the total projected offensive attempts between pass attempts, rush attempts for Washington at 55, which is like 2 to 3 attempts less than any other team on the entire slate. So what you're saying definitely is backed up by the data and what we're projecting as well. You know, the opportunities Green Bay is going to have they're probably safe from a points allowed standpoint, but that's not where you're generating your big time upside. So I think they're going to look very well from a projection standpoint because probably going to get a couple sacks and you're not going to give up a ton of points, and that's fine. But as far as the huge ceiling game, it might not be as juicy as it looks when you're just like, oh, Dwayne Haskins sucks and he's on the road and a big underdog. Let's pick against him.
Like, I would say that there's an 80% chance that the Vikings face more pass attempts from Blau than the Packers do from Haskins.
Yeah, we have the Lions with 59 combined team attempts and a 60% pass ratio, and Washington with 55 total team attempts and a 57% pass ratio, which might even be a little bit high. So more plays for the Lions and a higher pass ratio for them. So that's a decent amount of attempts more than we're projecting for Washington.
Okay. Mike Leone, dailyroto.com. Thanks for joining me. This is an atypical Friday show, but I really liked it. I feel like I have a better understanding of the slate now.
Yeah, it's nice to do stuff on Fridays when you get that injury report. And, even if you don't have the final injury report, it's really helpful to get that news. I know it's good to get content out early, but that's, we started doing our premium podcast on Saturday mornings for the same reasons. You just better information, better quality of content. So thanks for having me on. It's been a little while for us.
Yeah, it really has. Oh, Golden Tate has cleared concussion protocol. You want to know something that's super? I really like the Saints this week at -2 against the Niners. I think that the Saints might wax the Niners, but I mean, I've been wrong on the Niners most of the year. But Terran Armstead's back with his high ankle sprain. He's missed the last 2 games. Getting your left tackle back against this defensive line, the way I envision this game going is that we know that the Niners probably have the best D-line in football, but the Saints actually have one of the best O-lines. I think they can mitigate the pass rush a little bit. So if you're just taking then it just reverts back to maybe that the Saints offense can be, slightly less or on par with the 49ers defense because Sherman's banged up, D Ford's banged up. They're going to play, but they're not going to be 100%. So let's say those things are a wash and the entire game comes down to San Francisco's offense versus the Saints defense. Like, I feel this like the Saints defense is significantly better than the Niners offense.
Yeah, I was just looking up Super Bowl odds because I had seen some data on the Saints that suggests that they've been really, really good, like better than the market seems. But
they're second. They're second. I have them as the second best odds. Yeah.
I'm looking at them. They're tied with the Patriots. So apparently no value in that. Long shot bet on the Eagles, Pat. Now's the time.
Let's see. The Eagles they're still only 45-1 on mine.
Oh, I've been seeing 65-1. I guess it's one of those things that's like really different depending on what book you're looking at.
Like, I would say, like, of the things that I'm looking at right now, like, I don't think the Steelers are going to win the Super Bowl, but I think that they're a better bet at 80-1. The AFC is weaker, and they have potentially the best defense in that conference.
Yeah, but the Eagles will get that first home game. I don't know. The Steelers are like at KC if they make the playoffs.
Yeah, but the Steelers are weird. They could beat KC.
I mean, none of these teams have a very good chance of winning, so I guess I shouldn't be quibbling over the round 1 matchup for them. But if we're at making fun bets, if you get the Eagles at 65-1, 45-1, yeah, that seems pretty light. But
I think there is a path, and this week will determine a lot of it. Like, I don't think that Buffalo is equipped to match up with the Ravens whatsoever. I think that's a really bad matchup for them. And I think that the Chiefs are a really bad matchup. So maybe you would have to play. I don't know if there's a scenario where you couldn't play one of those 2 teams, but I do think the Bills
at Houston, they could start.
They could beat Houston definitely in round 1, and I think they could beat the Patriots too. I think they're the right type of style of team to beat those 2 teams. But because the explosive offense, and yeah, the Texans have an explosive offense too, but I think the Bills could rush 3 guys and get to Watson.
In theory, if the Bills won at Houston, they'd probably be at New England because it'd probably be KC versus Baltimore. Oh, no, we'd be at Baltimore because Baltimore would be the 1 seed.
So the Bills could really do themselves a huge favor by beating the Ravens this week.
Yeah, beat the Ravens, lose to New England. If theoretically you want to set up the chance to play New England round 2 of the playoffs.
How do you think the Bills match up against Kansas City? I actually think that's their worst opponent.
I don't know. It's hard. We haven't played very many good teams. I know Bills fans hate hearing that. And I think we've played I think the beginning of the year we got lucky and had a really easy schedule, and then I think something clicked with Allen and Dayball offensively, and the last 3 weeks I think they've been legitimately good. And you've seen that in DVOA where early in the year they were 6-3 or whatever, and they were like 22nd in DVOA, and then all of a sudden they rose all the way to 11th or something 3 weeks later. So I think there's like more optimism in me that there might actually be good. But as far as the matchup against KC, I don't know. I think we match up worse against Baltimore, and then versus KC and New England, I'm unsure.
Okay. Well, this week in terms of spreads, I like the Saints -2. I like the Broncos +9.5. Those would be my two that I'm going with. Do you any spreads you like? I still like that over in the Dolphins Jets game.
I like Carolina +3.5.
It's a good line. The hook is pretty enticing.
Yeah, it draws you in big time. And then that's kind of the only one that sticks out. I'm kind of on Tampa Bay -3 a little bit here.
Really?
I feel like that's one where everyone really just, people do not like Jameis, and I don't know. I feel like it's that line's like one of those weird lines that's going to draw people into the Colts, and all their health issues are just going to arise. And Tampa Bay at home, pretty good pass offense. They can put up points.
In terms of overall money this week, whether it be on spreads or money lines, the biggest one-sided games are the 49ers have drawn 79% of the money against the Saints. Where's the other one here? The Ravens have drawn 72% against the Bills. The Packers are drawing 72% against the Redskins. And the only other team above 70, Vikings, 72% against the Lions. I would assume those big favorites are a lot of like money line parlays and putting them together. But shocking. Actually, no. Here's a really interesting one. 54% of people have bet on the Steelers to cover against the Cardinals. Yet, 87% of the money is on the Cardinals.
I don't know enough about those trends. So that's kind of like indicating that the public is betting Pittsburgh and that the sharps are betting Arizona, right?
I think you could dissect it a bunch of different ways. I think you could say that, because I mean, with the actual picks, that's people taking the spread, that fewer people are taking the +2 for Arizona, and they're just straight up betting the money line instead. Like they're giving up.
But essentially more bets are coming in on Pittsburgh, but the big bets are coming in on Arizona.
All the spread bets are coming in on Pittsburgh, but just bet the total handle in general, money line and spreads, favors Arizona significantly. So that would lead me to believe that people aren't
misunderstood that.
Yeah, so people aren't betting Arizona +2.5. They're betting Arizona to win at like +140, whatever it is.
In general, I lose every week betting for Cleveland and betting against Pittsburgh. So why not keep that going this week? Me, Colin, and Dink are all doing pretty well in the DK Super Pool, by the way.
Oh, really? Hey, any chance at like legit money?
I don't think any chance of winning, but I think we could all. I think I'm like 26-16. Now you get the stale lines because they lock the lines in on Thursday.
No,
so everyone does like.
You can take advantage of that. There is merit to like picking, like, well, I did this earlier in the year, like the Kansas City Tennessee game when Mahomes came back.
Oh my God, we all took Kansas City.
I actually, like, we said it on the show. It's just like, if you're behind in any pool, just take Tennessee, because everyone's going to.
No, it makes sense.
It's a double win if you get it right.
We weren't able, because we have it like via proxy, because we're not there to put our picks in. So we weren't able to get the picks in on Thanksgiving, and the Bears line shifted a ton. So we couldn't get the Bears, and we were so pumped that it looked like Detroit was going to cover, and all those people were going to like take that as like their quote unquote free game. And then the Bears end up covering by half a point. That was brutal.
The other one where there's like a big discrepancy between spread and money line, there's two of them. Like, people are picking the Falcons -3.5 as their spread picks, but I guess people are just outright betting the Panthers to win. 61% of handle is on them. Same as Browns and Bengals. And this is one where it seems like the public is picking the Browns, but sharps are betting the Bengals. 64% of bets have been on spread bets have been on the Browns, but 65% of the money is on the Bengals.
Yeah. I mean, seven just seems like a lot
win.
for. I don't think the Bengals are going to win. But
I think they
7
could
just seems
win.
like a lot for Cleveland.
Like if you bet the money line right now, it's plus 260 on Cincinnati. Like, did they have that % chance of winning? I think they do.
I am not a lot. I can't give any more Cleveland advice one way or the other. If Odell Beckham doesn't do well this week, I'm permanently banned by the company to mention Cleveland or any associated players. It's been rough. It's been rough, Pat.
I know that we've been going long here and we're over, but any interest in Nick Chubb this week? It didn't feel like anyone's going to play him.
No, I will. If I know, I will also say I know we've been going long, but I do want to tilt that I have a futures bet on Nick Chubb for most rushing touchdowns and a futures bet on Christian McCaffrey for most rushing yards, and I'm going to lose the Nick Chubb rushing touchdowns, but he's also currently ahead of McCaffrey in rushing yards, so I'm a little bit annoyed. I feel like pretty good that McCaffrey can catch him, but a little bit annoyed by that.
Yeah, you still have to fade like Dalvin Cook or even like someone. If Rashad Penny gets down, then you have to fade like Chris Carson as well.
Yeah, but I can't believe I don't have a Lamar futures bet. Like, I'm tilting that. My only 2 live ones are the McCaffrey rushing yards and Jameis passing yards, but Dak's garbage time passing yards has given him a decent cushion.
Yeah. All right, Mike Leone, at 2hats1mike on Twitter, dailyroto.com. The promo code THEPME will get you 10% off at dailyroto.com. You mentioned the premium podcast drops on Saturday mornings. What else? When's the last update of projections that you guys do for the optimizer?
Oh, we go all the way through initial lock, all the way through the afternoon. You know, the main update is going to come Saturday when we do the premium podcast, Sunday morning after the Schefter bombs drop, and then Sunday around 11:30 to 11:45 a.m. when the inactives come out. That's when the main updates for projections are pushed. But we'll be around to update stuff for the afternoon lock. So if that Josh Jacobs news doesn't break till afternoon inactives around 3 p.m., we'll update our projections so you can see where everything stands and figure out your late swaps and everything. So we don't really rest on Sundays. We're there all day for you, updating all the way through the Sunday showdown inactives. You're playing the Sunday night showdown slate.
Right, I'm Pat Mayo. Follow me on the social medias. Remember to vote for me in the FSGA Fantasy Analyst of the Year and play in the Pat Mayo Experience DraftKings Open for the week. 3 max entry, $15 to play. No rake, so it's all guaranteed money in the prize pool. You can find everything in the description of this video or podcast for that, as you can with all of the other updated content that I've been putting out all week. DraftKings cheat sheet will drop on Saturday afternoon on dkplaybook.com. All right, I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you all for watching. Tune in Sunday morning, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time to get your questions answered. Or you can be cursed by Tim Advocast. Either way, I'll see you next time.
Mayo experience! Experience!